Welcome to the Decide webinar on designing inclusive and scalable collective energy actions. And today we would like to record this session, if that is okay for everybody. We are also hoping that the webinar will be, let's say, that you can join us in the discussion and you can also ask your questions. You're free to turn on your camera and your mics if you want to join in and ask a question, but you can also type it into the chat and we'll discuss that later. The agenda for today will be as follows. So I will have a very brief introduction of the Decide project, and then we'll have 5-minute presentations from each of the panelists. So first, Michael Brennan Flisser from Ioneum Research will present some of the results of the KPIs for collective energy actions. And there is a KPI tool that will be presented on the webinar on the 11th of May. But today, Michael will mainly talk about which are the KPIs that are relevant for the inclusive and scalable collective energy actions. And then after Michael, Gosia Matowska from Tinky will follow, and she will be presenting some, let's say, checklists that we have taken out on what collective energy actions can do to design their initiatives to be inclusive and scalable. And that will sort of follow the KPIs, so be within the similar, let's say, approach. And we'll also have, during this period, interviewed a lot of initiatives, and Gosha will talk about that and give some examples. And then finally, we have, I think Jens has joined us. Hi, Jens. Can you try to turn on your camera and mic just so we check that everything is okay this time? We have Jens Lovitz. He's from Kelso Institute in Berlin, and he's going to be talking about different ways of making collective energy actions inclusive and provide some examples from his experience. I really hope that his technical issues are solved now. Jens?
Yes, I'm
Hi.
here.
Okay, good. Okay,
Can
we
you
have
see
you.
me?
We cannot see you, but we can hear you. So hopefully the video follows in a minute as well.
Yes, okay.
And then we'll open up with a panel discussion, questions from you, questions from us, a bit of sort of interactive discussion with the really tangible actions that collective energy actions can do to design their initiatives to be better. And then finally, we'll conclude with some future steps as Decide project is soon closing. So present some of the coming up events. So Decide project. Decide has been ongoing now for already 3 years. And it's a Horizon project. And we've been working on trying to figure out which are the main, let's say, actions, recipes, building blocks that collective energy actions need so that they can be replicated across Europe. Within this project, we had 7 pilots, which are in yellow here, which we started with in 5 different European countries. And then later on through the project, we included additional initiatives, which we call deciders, additional 14 deciders, who have been involved with us in different, let's say, webinars, workshops, and different activities. And we have learned from them and they have learned from each other, hopefully, throughout the project. So what we have done in the past 3 years is basically we've collaborated and interacted directly with more than 40 initiatives on the ground. We call them collective energy actions, so energy communities and collective actions. We have involved in different activities, engagement surveys, let's say, and also activities on the ground, more than 3,000 end consumers. Our initiatives have more than 13 energy actions that they're implementing in their communities or collectives. And Decide has had a lot of, let's say, webinars, workshops, and different initiatives where we involved more than 450 participants. So throughout this work, let's say, why is this important? Because throughout this, let's say, this work, we extracted some of the lessons that you will hear today. We have presented maybe even a year ago now how we put together the different initiatives into 7 business model categories, although we cannot say that one initiative is only using one of these categories, but rather we see that an initiative might be using one or multiple of these business models to, let's say, get the benefits back to the community. And with this Then we started analyzing, okay, these are the business models. How can we say, what can we extract from interactions with initiatives to know if they are being inclusive towards different types of members, and if they can scale up, grow, also replicate to different countries. So that is the main topic of today. And with that, I would like to give word to Michael to hear, let's say, his take on the KPIs and what are really quantitative things that that initiatives can do. And Jens, we see you. We hopefully hear you as well. Thank you for being here. Michael, please take the floor.
Yes, thanks, Lucia. I'm going to share my screen, and hello to everybody. First of all, of course, I'm Michael Brenner-Flieser from Ioneum Research, and today I'm going to present you just very shortly some of the things we did with developing a tool for energy communities and collective actions. And as Lucia already said, there will be another workshop next week. So today I'm really just wants to make you hungry to join the workshop we have in the next week and really give you some very rough ideas. I hope you already can see my screen. Yeah. Okay, great. What we did with the maturity and scalability tool, as we call it, is that we tried to develop a self-assessment tool which provides insights into key features of initiatives, to give them the chance to really understand what the core strengths and weaknesses of their initiatives are and how they probably can improve it. So therefore, we also give some helpful tips and recommendations, and I will show you the things in a minute. But first of all, just to also give credits to other people who were involved in the development. This is an ongoing action. Actually, we started that in another project, which is called Compile, and with the help especially of Stanislav Derbemont, who did a lot of things there. So just giving him the credit here as he deserves. What we want to measure with this tool is, first of all, a maturity. And we understand with that the resilience and robustness of an initiative against unexpected changes. So we have seen that in the last years in the energy systems, there can be such rapid changes, and we want to identify the features which are important that communities can react to these changes. And what we also want to measure, of course, is scalability. So how can a community or an initiative become bigger, grow without losing its functionality? And the third thing, which probably is not so important, is replicability. So the question, how can an initiative being replicated in different environments? But we will focus on the first two aspects. And what we did is a lot of literature research and also expert interviews with deciders and other people who have something to say about that. And we identified 8 different dimensions which we think are relevant for measuring these aspects of maturity and scalability. You can see them here. I'm not going to read them. But as today it is about inclusivity and scalability, I just want to focus a little bit more on 2 of these aspects. The first one is the community aspect, and especially the aspect with members and supporters. So how can an initiative understand and make sure that its members are also really working towards the goal of the initiative? And we identified different indicators to measure that. And we think the most important one is to measure the commitment of the members. This is why this one is here in bold. But we also have identified other dimensions or indicators. Some quite obviously, others probably not so, and probably about these others we can talk a little bit more in the second part. For example, diversity of members, which is also, of course, very much related to inclusivity. We had a lot of discussions if diversity is something, which is just wanted in terms of normative aspects, so to have as many people from the society in the initiative, or if it is also something initiatives need to really grow and become better and improve. So probably this might be something we want to discuss later on. And you can see the other aspects here. And the second thing, just to also give you a glance about upscaling, of course, here we try to identify some market conditions which might be relevant if an initiative says, okay, now we want to become bigger. And we thought that probably the most important aspect here might be to cooperate with established players on the market, which might help you a lot. But you can see that we also have identified other potential indicators. And as with the other aspects, I'm happy to discuss that more with you if you think that these are good indicators or if you see other aspects as relevant, because of course it is your practical experience that is very important for these things, and looking forward to see that. And as I said here, in terms of timing, I just can give you this very short glance, but there will be this webinar in the next week, and of course I invite all of you to join this webinar to hear more about all these things, and yeah, still discuss some things today. But with that, I'm now already at the end, and thanks for your attendance, hopefully, and lucky to discuss with you, or happy to discuss with you later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for keeping to the time. It's a very short and let's say overall introduction that shows some of the KPIs, but we'll discuss a bit more in details later on. Maybe at this point, Gosha, if you can present, and then we'll have Jens after you.
Perfect. Yes, let me just share my screen as well. And I hope that there will not be any technical hiccups while I'm presenting. Okay, can you see the presentation? Perfect.
Yes.
So hello everyone, my name is Gosia Montowska, and I was lucky enough to be a part of the team that is working on contractual agreements within collective energy actions. We are carrying on actually on this activity from the beginning of the project, and we have already published our first report on that topic in December 2021. If you would like to go and check it out on our website, please do so. Back at the time, we were mainly collecting information from our pilots and deciders, so initiatives within the project, and a part, of course, of the topic of business models, which is present in one of the chapters. We were also working on contractual obligations. What we wanted to see is we wanted to focus on the analysis on existing and emerging business obligations, contractual obligations, and to see to what extent they could, on one hand, impact the development of collective energy initiatives, on the other hand, to what extent they could also increase investments in renewables, and also to see whether, and if they do, to what extent they offer a fair arrangement between parties. We have proposed in this report certain classification on the contractual obligations that the collective energy actions should take into consideration while preparing contracts for, on one hand, members and then their employees. However, this time around, we decided to change our approach slightly. We used a mix of quantitative and qualitative methods. As you can see on the slides, we sent a survey and then interviewed more than 25 and then more than 20 initiatives outside of the DECIDE project, covering 10 European countries. Then together with Michael's team, we were analyzing the information, the data that we collected together with the KPIs that his team has prepared. And our goal this time around was to really prepare a set of very clear recommendations and points that collective energy actions should take into consideration both in pre-contractual and contractual phase when they're preparing their work. And this is how we came up with 9 checklists for collective energy actions. The factors that we considered can be grouped in the groups that you can see on the slide. So social factors, economic, technical factors, and replication and upscaling. And we prepared them for 3 types of legal documents or contracts that collective energy actions are working on. So these are defining legal documents, as we call them. We can call them also a statute or status, whatever. Then contracts with members and contracts with employees. So to start with social factors, now you can see the 3 types of contracts that we were working on, 3 types of checklists. And I hope that in the discussion afterwards, we're going to discuss a little bit more about specific bullet points that have been added on this checklist. But for the moment, I wanted to focus on one of the points that is highlighted in bold on the left side. And it is that it's very important to agree on the initiative's mission, goal, or vision in a written form already from the outset of the initiative. This jointly agreed mission actually helps to ensure cohesion about initiative members. And while this mission or vision can be broader at the initiation phase, areas of business activity so should be gradually narrowed down to specific actions and services. And based on this, collective energy action will have a defined role in the energy system, which is very important. Here also to say that it's not so obvious that actually all initiatives or all collective energy actions have a very clear vision. In the survey that I mentioned beforehand, we have asked one question, and it was whether the collective energy action is focusing more on environmental goals, social or economic. So nothing, let's say, too complicated for the initiatives. And it's important also to mention that they could have marked all 3 of them. What we have seen is that 95% of collective energy actions mentioned that the most important, that their goal is linked to environmental matters. 65% of them mentioned the economic or financial goal, and only 50% of them mentioned the social goal. So now I will probably jump to the second set of factors, economic and technical factors. And here I wanted to tell you a little bit more about avoiding financial dependence on external funding. What I want to mention here are 2 very important things. So an initiative needs to take into consideration having an appropriate cash flow ratio. Cash flow ratio measures the number of times an initiative can pay off current debts with the cash generated within the same period. And it actually allows to estimate the level of independence of the initiative from external funding, mostly banks. And the second thing that I wanted to mention here is the debt structure. And this indicates how the collective energy action could finance new or expand their activities without expecting an immediate return on investment. And here, for instance, we have seen then in the literature that a debt level of less than 30% and provided by members rather than non-members or banks gives an initiative rather good basis or solid basis for further and future development. And then last part are the replication and upscaling factors. And here, bearing in mind the time that has left, I wanted just to mention that it's really, really important that the initiative actually takes part in umbrella organization, can be a part of a cluster, an association, or for example, as our pilots and decider is working with EU projects or other projects where actually the knowledge transfer can happen and the initiatives can exchange on what they have learned and the solutions they have applied to their problems. And with that, I will thank you all. I hope that there will be some interesting questions afterwards and we can exchange on that a little bit later.
Thank you, Gosia. Thanks, both you and Michael. I see that we have Jens back with us. There was a problem, but now you're back. We can hear you, no?
Yes, I'll try
Okay.
to share my screen. I'm sorry, there seem to be some conflicts with my Teams, but I think that should work now. Do you see
Now
my
we
screen?
see you and we see your screen as well.
Excellent.
So,
okay, very well.
yeah.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Lucia. I would like to quickly report from the Horizon Project SCORE, Supporting Consumer Ownership in Renewable Energies, which came to an end roughly a year ago. And what I would like to focus on is the question of inclusivity. So our project was a coordination support action where we implemented what we call consumer stock ownership plans in 4 pilot regions. And the focus was to include underrepresented groups while at the same time making projects potentially scalable. And in terms of justice, we were following the so-called 3 tenets of transitional justice. And I would like to just introduce them quickly before. One was, of course, the question of distributional justice. So identifying the concern, which requires an analysis of distributional effects in projects with regard to the different stakeholders participating, but also with regard to the relation within groups. The second tenet is justice as recognition, and that really refers to what we're discussing here, to inclusion, and that is to identify whom these projects or their position, whom they affect, and especially how potential repercussions are perceived by the groups. So it's not so much a perspective from the outside to the group, but it's really trying to see whether you've overlooked groups or whether groups actually have a voice. And then the last would be procedural justice, where we identify strategies for remediation through an active empowerment process. And that brings me to the CSOP concept. The problems in the last step with regard to empowerment processes rely on what we call the engagement chain. I'm not going into any details about the potential for consumer engagement, but let me just say what our result was, that independently of the type of projects, underrepresented groups, especially low-income households, are a problem in any project, be it a cooperative or be it a commercially oriented project. And what is really at the core of our lessons, so to say, that we learned is what I call here in Figure 3 the engagement chain. And that, in a nutshell, says that there's not only one problem of engagement, but that there are many, and that's important, that they're all interconnected. So it's not only about access to finance, which actually comes at the very end, but as you see here, it is firstly about awareness. So no opportunity if you're not aware of it. Secondly, you know about the opportunity, but you may not understand the opportunity. So it's about literacy. The third level would be you know and you understand, but you mistrust the market actors, which is often in projects the case. And the next one would be, although you trust others, you're inexperienced, but you don't trust yourself. And then the next level would be when those obstacles are overcome, you want to engage, but you lack sufficient time or know-how. And lastly, you lack access to financing to effectively engage, which is the most commonly mentioned. But what we are saying is all of these levels are actually equally important, and they are all interconnected, which means that engagement is hindered already if only one place of this chain is broken. And the last one, which is adding to these, is sometimes there are even disincentives, especially for focus groups, which receive social transfers, because most of these social transfers are means tested. And that means that if you receive an income from, let's say, your participation in an energy community, the proceeds, the benefits, may be offset with your social transfers, which means there's a strong disincentive. So you've overcome all these obstacles, you're engaged now, but actually you can't properly benefit from the results. So at the core of this, what I call here lessons, is engagement is hindered already if only one place of this chain is broken. And this brings me to my last slide, which is what we developed in SCORE. We call this the Assisted Consumer Stock Ownership Plan. And I won't go into any details. I'll just refer to 3 key elements here. So our assumption is that for vulnerable groups or for groups that are grappling or struggling with these different obstacles for engagement, a trusteeship may be a solution which, on the one hand side, protects these consumers vis-a-vis to other stakeholders, which may be more knowledgeable or more powerful and have more voice. But it also means that a trusteeship can make it easier to integrate them into decision making, because at the level of projects, very often the other partners don't want to discuss with individuals, especially if these individuals are not perceived as equals. So in one of our projects, and that's the one that I refer to, and Lucia will share the link to a video on this project with the materials, in Słupsk in Poland, we actually had homeless in a homeless shelter to become co-owners of a photovoltaic installation that IKEA donated. So there was no real investment, but the installation was donated. But what is important is that all these residents of the shelter contributed a very small portion of their very, very small income. And the second element of the assisted consumer stock ownership plan is that they would receive a matching contribution to their investment. So each zloty they invested was topped up by 2 zlotys of a matching contribution. And important is also, that's the third element, that the trusteeship enables members to leave the project when they leave the shelter, and to transfer their share to an arriving resident in the shelter. Details will be available in a short 5-pager that you can read about this project. What I want to stress, and that's really where I'm closing also this quick intervention, what is really sad is that although the project in principle was a success and the installation was opened with a celebration, and all the of the 50 residents, around 25 were actually ready to participate as co-investors with a very, very small symbolic amount. The city, after municipal elections, decided to withdraw from the project because this was seen as too political, and they only had a very thin majority of 1 vote in the city council. So the project was aborted, although technically it was a success. We are now trying to get back to it and replicate this project, because the association that runs the homeless shelter also runs 60 other homeless shelters and was interested in replicating our approach. However, in the concrete pilot, although the installation was opened with a big celebration, everything seemed to be fine. In the end, the city left the project, so it was discontinued. However, I'll be open for questions, and with that, I'll close. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you, Jens. I shared also the link to the video that you mentioned and the project. And indeed, I've seen this video. I think you shared it with me last week, and it leaves a mark, and it leaves really an impression, because we talk a lot in our project as well, but in all the other projects that deal with collective energy action and energy communities, we talk a lot about inclusivity and getting different types of stakeholders involved. But then a lot of times we sort of make it easy for them to enter by saying, here is, you can join us, you can get this for free. But then in the end, they're not really involved, and they don't really get much of the information about what's going on. They get indeed they get the financial benefit, from the project, but they don't get information about energy transition. Why is this important? They don't get more, let's say, informed about use of energy and being energy efficient and so on. And I think through an approach that you guys had in this project, and I really invite all of you that are present here to check out the the video and also check out the approach that Jens has been talking about. It indeed gets people involved because now, okay, they own part of it and then they want to know a bit more about energy transition. I'm really glad to have you all here. The questions that I wanted to discuss is, okay, we say how you design a collective energy action to be inclusive and to be scalable. And we've seen indeed concrete KPIs, we've seen checklists from Gosha and also some of the example from Jens. But let's say I don't know much about, let's say, energy, and I want to get involved into this sort of project because indeed everybody today is concerned about energy. It's more expensive. It's becoming a very important part also of our bill at the end of the month in many countries, but also it's something where now I hear that I can get involved. Before it was more sort of a centralized thing that, you know, energy, you just get it as a consumer. My question to you is, for example, Michael, when you presented the KPIs and you say the important part is commitment of members, that sounds like, okay, we sort of know, yeah, that's important, but how do you measure this? You know, what is the KPI? Like if I'm organizing in a collective energy action today, you know, how do I measure this? And how can I maybe also added question towards Gosha and Jens, whoever from you feels like answering, how do I design this into the initiative? Do I put it in a contract? Do I put it, where do we, you know, where is the best place in your opinion to sort of make sure, you know, there is a commitment, there is equality, there is involvement? How do we put this into design of the initiative?
Shall I start to answer?
Sure.
Probably with the most methodologically answer here now, because our tool actually in the end is a methodological tool. And how we measured the commitment is actually that we ask for how many people or how many members of the initiative are taking part in regular meetings, in the decision-making process and so on. Yeah, and this is how we measured it from a purely methodological point of view. Of course, not answering how you can get a bigger engagement with that.
Yeah, but then you have some initiatives that have regular meetings, and then you have some that don't have regular meetings. Yeah, we see that, for example, in Decide, that there is collective actions where they maybe meet with the members or maybe once a year. Maybe they just more inform them than engage them. Is that a bad thing? How do we classify this?
It depends, of course, a little bit what the goal of your initiative is. But in general, if you really want to have a social, an initiative which focuses on social aspects and really sees itself as a community project, then I would say it's a bad sign if you don't have a big commitment of a lot of the members. Yeah. On the other hand, of course, is if you probably are a little bit more, let's say, market oriented, it might be okay if you have a lot of passive consumers, so to say, even though you might not work for gain money, but it might be okay to say, okay, we have these services and we provide you with the services, and it's totally okay for us if you are not engaging very strongly with what we are doing, as long as you are using our services. Yeah. But usually what we see also from the literature especially is that social and community aspects play quite a big role in initiatives and communities. And in this case, I would say that it is important to find ways to really engage as many of the members as possible.
And maybe if I can, sorry.
No, I just wanted to add, because we have asked people that are participating here which country they're representing, which country they're from. And we have, of course, majority from Belgium, because, of course, a lot of, let's say, institutions are organized in Belgium. We have participants from Poland, Latvia, Austria, and Switzerland. So this is sort of let's say, a bit of a spread across Europe. And I think that's sort of where maybe my question was coming in, Michael, because we also see that it depends from different cultural perspectives if people want or maybe have time to be more involved or less involved. And how do we still, if they're less involved, how do we still make sure that, you know, they are somehow engaged and that we get feedback from them if what we're doing as an initiative is what they want. Yeah.
So maybe if I could just follow up also on what Michael was saying, because at this time we're going to more to the topic of this very concrete solutions or recommendations that we could be giving to the initiatives. So I think that first of all we can split them or into the initiatives that are really aiming for democratic participations and inclusiveness. Then it's really important to try to get people to participate in regular meetings, in general assemblies, etc. So everything that Michael has just said, this is extremely important. Also, what we have seen is that the bigger the initiative gets, the more difficult it is to actually get people engaged, because of course it is not that easy to make people attend hundreds people attend a workshop on a specific topic. So one could also try to split those people into thematic workshops or working groups, so they could actually, be included in the topics that are of their interest. And then I think that there is also the second type, let's say, of the initiatives, which are much more market-oriented. We're speaking there more about participants or customers in that case. And I would say that their commitment could be measured also in the participation in service. It's very important at each and every step, and to gather their feedback and to do it on a regular basis. So even though, of course, this won't be initiatives which will be organized in regular meetings, however, getting their feedback and on a regular basis and trying to understand what they think, how they want the initiative to be developed is very, very important. So this is how I would try to differentiate those 2 points.
Thank you, Gosia. Jens, from your experience, what do you think?
Actually, I would like to stress 2 elements. One is that engagement needs some sort of carrier. So when we started this project in Poland, most of the people at the municipality actually were very skeptical, and they were almost irritated that because this wasn't really planned by the city. We visited the shelter. We heard that IKEA was going to donate the installation, and one of our ideas was to improve energy efficiency of the shelter as part of the SCORE project. And then we had the idea, why not make them co-owners, because that was the least probable, because nobody really thought that this were possible. And the engagement instrument was really the discussion about energy efficiency in the beginning. So we started to discuss with the residents how to improve energy efficiency in the shelter, making it clear that they're important, that their behavior mattered, showing them, having small seminars showing them that how much a light bulb, how much kilowatt hours a light bulb would use over a period of time, how much an LED in comparison, and so on and so forth. And surprise, surprise, they were interested, of course. That was our assumption. Everybody had this idea that homeless are per se not interested, which is totally untrue. So that was the first thing. And then using this discussion about energy efficiency started to trigger a process within the group, which showed us clearly that they were interested. And then the second, so this is important, that there has to be some context, and you need to take people serious as actors. That's the first message. The second one is and award them an active role in terms of not necessarily this ownership role, but an active role in increasing energy efficiency in this case, right? Because the ownership was maybe at the beginning really something abstract for them. The second issue that I would like to stress is, and that's really important about our approach about the trusteeship, is that this trusteeship is really flexible. So how to what extent the individuals are actually involved in, be it decision making or in other activities, really depends on each individual case. And that depends mostly on personal capabilities. So do they have time? Do they have the knowledge, and so on and so forth? So what we advocate is that the actual extent of the involvement is stipulated in the trusteeship agreement. So there may be cases where most of the decisions will be taken by the trustee, and there may be cases where the opposite could be the case. But it is flexible, so there can be a time of apprenticeship that participants learn how to be involved, and later, simply by changing this degree of involvement, they can. It's a learning process. So that it's not set in stone. That from the beginning they have to attend so and so many meetings, they have to do this or that. But it really depends on their readiness to do so. And this flexibility is important because on the one hand side, at the beginning of the project, it protects the participants also. And that's what I said about trusting themselves. So sometimes they may be thankful that there's a trustee who is knowledgeable and whom they perceive as their advocate, so to say, to represent them. But little by little, as they acquire more expertise, they can also be involved more intensively. And this flexibility, I think, is also key. So it's not a one size fits all, or it's not a predefined approach, but it really depends on the capabilities and what these groups actually want. And that was really central for our project.
Thank you, Jens. And I see there's a question in chat, and it sort of builds on what you're saying now. From Dinle Vanya. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing something wrong. But they ask, they say, great presentation, thanks a lot. It was very informative. Building on the notion of distribution of benefits and burdens in an inclusive energy initiative, can you share your thoughts about how can such initiatives ensure this equitable distribution of benefits and burdens from the inception phase, considering the existence of vulnerable marginalized group in the initiative? So how can you, from the beginning, make sure that the benefits, but also, let's say, the burdens of being involved in energy initiatives are shared among all members, taking into account that you have these vulnerable members involved? I understand from your presentation, you believe that this concept of trusteeship, right?
Trusteeship, yes.
solves this issue, because in there you somehow define which are the, let's say, how is the vulnerable group different in this aspect, right?
Well, okay, I'll very quickly comment on that. So the idea is that some decisions, like day-to-day operating decisions, may be without the realm of the participants, and in these decisions they are represented by the trustee, to make this a little bit clearer. But if there is an important decision of a capital increase or a change of the of the installation, then they will vote, and then they will be represented by the trustee in the board meeting with their vote. So that's about the way that we convey these different grades or these different levels of participation. However, with regard to the question, how can we assure this, is the trustee will represent, in our case, the 25% that the homeless owned or were to own in the project, and that means that, of course, 75% of the shares were still with the city or represented by the association, and of course they had a 3/4 majority, so there is no guarantee, if you wish so. However, with having a professional or somebody who is knowledgeable, and the trustee can be somebody from the municipality. In our case, the idea was that it was an NGO that was advocating energy efficiency, is of course a person that is knowledgeable and knows the project and has the ability to also argue about this sharing, about burdens and profits. And but the principle was that it was proportional to shareholding. So 25% of the benefits would also go to the homeless shareholders, and 75 would go to the city, whereas the city would agree that 25% of this share would go into energy efficiency. So it really depends. I think it's it has to be tailored in each case, and maybe that's your question. There's no guarantee, except for in projects where clearly the marginalized group has a majority and that's a governance problem in such projects.
I think one thing that I wanted, thank you for the response. And one thing that I wanted to sort of taking into account that we have only 10 minutes left, but just to sort of transfer from inclusivity towards scalability, because I think those two are very closely connected, making sure that the initiatives that are formed are not, let's say, a sparkle in the sky and they're there and there is no other initiatives that can replicate this, or it cannot grow further and include other members because it was very specific to that one case. That's something that we really try to understand. And I think that's along sort of the lines of the question that we see from Alexander here in the chat. He asks, what are your thoughts for initiatives that are aimed to be run on longer term? Yeah, which hopefully all energy initiatives are aimed in this direction, aimed for three aspects: social, environmental, and financial, have very low operational costs in principle. However, they require significant initial capital expenditure, thus require for time being government aid, for example, due to technological constraints. Then there is mentions of the different technological constraints. May I ask you if it would be meaningful to be dependent on governmental aid? And I know both Michael and Gosha might have something to say on this, so maybe we start with Gosha and then I let also Michael and Jens, but please be brief in your response. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to mention from the outset that if we're thinking about initiatives that should be replicated, it is not ideal to be dependent on government ads. From the outset, what is very important is to think of a sound business model plan on the return on investments, and if your initiative is dependent on this government ad, it cannot be run in the long term. So I would, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe what I would like to add to that, what we've seen, what I mentioned also with the business model, is that we see sometimes that initiatives start with a very governmental dependent, let's say, business model, because there is incentives, of course, and this is what people get around. And then on that, they build with additional, let's say, business models that are more market oriented. And this way, they try to keep their, let's say, their that they extend to longer period. Michael, did you have any comment to this?
I can more or less add what you already said. I think it's not a really big issue if you are dependent on money at the beginning, on governmental money. I mean, the money is there and it's dedicated for such things, so why shouldn't we use it? But I really would recommend to think from the beginning about a business plan that at some points doesn't rely anymore on external money. Yeah. It is. I don't think that it is needed that from the beginning you can work on your own, but at some point you should have an idea how you can further go on without relying on external money. And with that, I would say then you're fine.
Thank you, Michael. Jens.
Actually, in our project, it wasn't governmental money, so to say. I mean, we the PV installation, which was 10 kilowatt peak, was donated by IKEA. So that relieved the pressure, so to say, that there was no real investment.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we would advocate more than government money. But why not? If there are subsidies, absolutely no problem. But what is important is that the obstacle, as I see it, is really more the institutional setting. And as in our tragic project, if you wish so, it was really municipality who was so cumbersome. And that's an observation that we make from all our pilots. It's really difficult to deal with institutions, especially municipalities, because they're very complex. They don't speak with one voice. There are all these different departments, and it's a learning process. So this will take time. And I wouldn't say that the financing is the main problem, but it's rather really communication and interaction with municipalities, and try to having somebody who's really a pacemaker there. That's key to success for such projects.
Thank you, Jens.
Maybe
Thanks.
one footnote in France, actually, and that's I would like to entice the participants to look into this. In France, the transposition of RED II as a very interesting aspect, because by law, social housing projects are defined that they are potential renewable energy communities, and furthermore, if such a housing project has a renewable energy installation, then all the residents by default become members of that energy community. So we are now hoping to understand how this unfolds. It's a very progressive approach. It's a bit like organ donation, right? You have to say no, you have to opt out. And that's really interesting with regard to engagement. But I have no idea yet how this whether this will be a success or not. But for people who are interested, then please follow the French story, because it's really interesting, and we still don't know how it will unfold. Thanks.
Thanks, Jens. And I know that some of the partners also within Decide and with other projects that we're collaborating with, there is a lot of work to sort of try to work with municipalities to make sure that they also understand the concept of energy communities, that they promote it, and that they provide support, if possible, towards their citizens to get involved. So hopefully, going both directions, not only bottom up, but also top down in that sense, then we'll get them also on board for these sort of initiatives. Okay, I want to close here because we're limited in time. I know this has been a very short discussion, but this is a topic that, could take a lot of time and could take a lot of discussion. We definitely have seen that within our project, that there is also different opinions and, different approaches. We do invite you to check out the webinar that was mentioned that is happening on May 11th, which will be on KPI tool, and a bit more, let's say it's a 2-hour webinar, I think, and it's a bit more hands-on on testing the tool and seeing if you find it. The idea of the tool is to sort of assess your initiative, but also tell you maybe in which directions you could improve. And there's link has been already shared, but maybe Sylvia or Valerie, if you can please share the link again in the chat, so the participants can see it here. We also, as I mentioned earlier, the Decide project is slowly closing, and we have our closing final conference on the 19th of June in Brussels. We'll also share a link to that so you can check it out. The agenda is almost complete, so the agenda is online already, but there is still some sessions that will be added to that. And we really hope to see, we are planning to bring a lot of different projects on board during this final event, and a lot of different institutions and initiatives, so that we hear sort of what are some of the results of Decide, where we got, and what are some of the questions that are still open, and see how maybe different initiatives or different projects can take those questions further. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time today. Thank you for your attention. Thanks all the speakers, Jens, Michael, Gosha. Thank you for your insights. And please follow the website on Decide to see a bit more on our results. We should be publishing the reports that include these things that Michael and Gosha talked about by the end of May. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.